Emily Carter's car tires crunched over the gravel road leading into Ravenwood, the fog thickening with every mile. The town had been abandoned for decades, a relic of a dark past that no one in the surrounding counties dared speak of. Emily, a determined investigative journalist, had a reputation for chasing stories that terrified most people into running the other way, but this one promised notoriety. Missing persons, strange disappearances, whispers of unholy rituals, Ravenwood with perfect material for her next feature. As she drove past the outskirts, the town seemed almost unreal. Buildings leaned precariously, their paint peeling, windows broken or boarded up. Rusted signs creaked in the wind, one reading faintly, "Leave before night falls." Emily dismissed it as superstition, jotting it down in her notebook. She parked in what had once been the town square and stepped out. The cold air smelled of damp wood and rot. A soft wind whispered across the empty streets, carrying faint, unintelligible sounds that made her skin crawl. She set up her camera tripod near the square's center, aiming to capture the eerie stillness of the place. Every so often, she caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, shadows flitting behind broken windows or darting across alleyways. When she turned to look directly, nothing was there. Emily chalked it up to nerves, though a tightening in her chest suggested otherwise. As she explored further, she noticed strange carvings etched into door frames and walls, symbols she didn't recognize. They looked old, weathered by years, yet deliberate, as though someone had left messages meant to survive time itself. A chill ran down her spine. Something about the town felt alive, watching her every move, waiting. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and Ravenwood streets seemed to grow narrower under the veil of twilight. Emily's flashlight cut through the darkness as she approached the remains of what had once been the town hall. Broken chairs littered the floor, and graffiti covered the walls, but beneath it she noticed faint red stains on the floorboards. Old blood, dried into the wood, telling a silent story of violence long past. She pulled out her camera to review the footage she'd already captured. Her heart skipped a beat. On the playback, a faint humanoid figure stood behind her in the town square, perfectly still, watching. When she looked around in real life, no one was there. Panic tinged her curiosity. A low whisper floated on the wind. Emily. Her breath caught. The name wasn't just a whisper. It was calling her. She spun around, flashlight shaking, eyes scanning the empty street. The shadows seemed to thicken, crawling along the edges of buildings, following her. Emily realized that Ravenwood was not just abandoned. It was waiting. Something ancient, something hungry lurked in the dark, and now it had noticed her. The fog deepened, curling around her feet as if to draw her in. Emily took a shaky step back toward her car, but the whispers grew louder, overlapping, as though the town itself was speaking. She raised her camera, determined to capture proof, but in that moment the shadows moved differently. They weren't just hiding, they were watching. And somewhere deep in the darkness, Emily felt the unmistakable sensation of eyes boring into her, waiting for her next move. Emily's hands trembled as she approached the looming silhouette of Ravenwood Manor. Once a grand estate, it now stood like a decayed sentinel, its windows black and lifeless, its roof sagging as if weighed down by decades of darkness. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, but curiosity and the thrill of uncovering the town's mysteries propelled her forward. The heavy front door groaned in protest as she pushed it open, the air inside thick with dust and the scent of rot. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a grand staircase coated in decades of grime, with portraits lining the walls, faces that seemed almost alive, their eyes following her every move. She stepped carefully, mindful of broken floorboards that threatened to collapse underfoot. As Emily explored the manor, the shadows began to move more boldly. At first it was subtle, a flicker in a hallway, a curtain swaying without a breeze. Then came the footsteps, soft and deliberate, echoing in rooms that should have been empty. She stopped in the dining hall, her flashlight catching faded, dried blood smeared across the table and walls, forming cryptic patterns. Symbols etched into the wood pulsed faintly in her imagination, as though trying to convey a warning or a threat. She found the mayor's old journal lying on a decaying desk. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with frantic handwriting, sacrifices, dark rituals, and mentions of entities that lived in the shadows. "They watch, they feed, they remember," one entry read. Another, "Fear gives them power. Do not let them see your heart tremble." A sudden slamming door made Emily jump. Her flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment she glimpsed a figure in the corner, a humanoid shadow with hollow eyes staring directly at her. She spun around. Nothing. The air felt thick, almost viscous, pressing in on her chest. The whispering began again, low and insistent, calling her name from every direction. "Emily, Emily." She ran up the grand staircase, hoping to find a safer vantage point, but the shadows followed. One elongated across the wall, stretching unnaturally and seemed to reach toward her. Her flashlight caught it briefly, a form that mimicked every move, yet distorted, unnatural, and terrifying. Heart racing, Emily stumbled into the attic. Dust motes floated like tiny specters in the beam of light, and she shivered as she realized she was trapped. The shadows swirled around her, forming shapes she couldn't comprehend, twisted figures of the townsfolk, some with grotesque smiles, others screaming silently. They were mocking, testing her courage, feeding on her fear. Emily clutched the mayor's journal, hoping for a clue, scanning the attic for any hint of escape. One passage caught her eye. "Face them with the truth, or they will take you as they took the others." Suddenly, a shadow lunged at her. She barely dodged, crashing into a stack of broken furniture. Her flashlight rolled across the floor, illuminating the figure again, closer now, advancing silently. Emily scrambled, heart hammering, realizing that the manor itself was alive with these entities, and every room she entered only led her deeper into their grip. A whisper echoed, louder than before. "You should have left." Emily's only choice was to keep moving forward, deeper into the darkness, where the shadows' secrets awaited, and where the true horror of Ravenwood Manor would be revealed. Emily barely escaped the attic, her lungs burning as she ran down the twisting halls of Ravenwood Manor. Shadows clung to every corner, darting along walls, stretching and twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. Each footstep echoed, but with it came whispers, hissing, taunting, calling her name over and over. It was as though the house itself had a heartbeat, and it was synchronized with her own. As she turned a corner, she nearly collided with Marcus, a wiry man in his 40s with hollow eyes and a grim expression. He had been hiding in the manor for years, surviving on scraps and shadows that feared him just enough not to strike. Marcus warned her, voice trembling. These shadows, they're not just memories, they're alive, feeding on fear, and they know you're scared. Emily explained what she had seen, the faces, the whispers, the creeping figures. Marcus nodded, pulling a small satchel from his coat. Inside were chalks, candles, and tattered papers covered in arcane symbols, instructions for a ritual meant to communicate with the shadows and learn how to escape. He admitted it was risky. Failure could mean being consumed, added to the town's eternal collection of lost souls, but it was the only chance. They began the ritual in the manor's grand hall, arranging candles in a circle and drawing the symbols on the floor with the chalk. Emily recited the incantations from the mayor's journal, while Marcus guided her through each step, his voice urgent and strained. The temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. Shadows gathered along the edges of the circle, writhing like black smoke, their whispering growing deafening. Suddenly, the largest shadow emerged at the far end of the hall, a grotesque humanoid form, larger than a man, with hollow eyes that glimmered faintly red. It mirrored Emily's movements perfectly, its twisted grin growing wider as it advanced. Marcus shouted for her to focus, to channel her courage, but fear gnawed at Emily's mind. Every instinct screamed to flee. As the ritual progressed, Emily was assaulted by horrifying visions, townsfolk from decades past, their faces twisted in agony, scenes of sacrificial rites replayed in vivid detail, their screams echoing in her ears. She felt herself being pulled toward the darkness realm, as if the darkness was trying to claim her soul. Marcus grabbed her arm, shouting over the cacophony, "Don't give it your fear! Fear feeds them." Summoning every ounce of courage, Emily focused, recalling the first whisper she had heard in the town square, the sense of foreboding that had drawn her in. She repeated the incantation with conviction, staring directly at the shadow. For a moment it froze, uncertain, its form flickering. The whispers faltered. The ritual was working, but only partially. Emily realized the truth. The shadow's power came not just from the ritual, but from her own terror. If she allowed panic to dominate, they would consume her. Summoning all her resolve, she pushed forward, refusing to let the shadow see her fear. But the largest shadow still loomed, slowly circling, waiting for the moment she faltered. Marcus looked at her with grim determination. "We have one chance to end this, or you join them forever." Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding. The shadows pressed closer, whispering her name. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, but she stood her ground, ready to confront Ravenwood's darkness head on. Emily's heart pounded like a drum in the silent grand hall as the largest shadow loomed before her. Its hollow eyes glimmered red, reflecting every flicker of candlelight. It mirrored her movements perfectly, twisting her own fear into something tangible, something monstrous. Marcus stood beside her, clutching the chalk symbols, his voice firm but trembling. "You have to face it. Don't let it control you." The shadow advanced slowly, deliberately, its form stretching across the floor, walls, and ceiling as if it belonged to the manor itself. Whispers surrounded them, unintelligible yet piercing, each syllable gnawing at Emily's mind. She felt the oppressive weight of decades of fear and sorrow in the room, Ravenwood's history pressing down like a physical force. Emily gritted her teeth, focusing on the ritual. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly as she chanted the incantation, each word vibrating in the air like a warning. The shadow hesitated, its movements jerky, uncertain. It recoiled slightly, as if the circle of light and chalk held power against it, but only for a moment. The whispers grew louder, threatening to drown out her voice. In a final surge of courage, Emily stepped forward, locking eyes with the monstrous shape. "I'm not afraid of you," she shouted, voice cracking but resolute. The shadow shrieked, a soundless scream that twisted the very air, then lunged at her. Heart hammering, Emily spun, drawing a circle of chalk around the shadow's feet. Flames from the candles flickered violently, and a low hum filled the hall. The shadow screamed in anguish, its form unraveling and writhing as if being pulled apart by invisible chains. Marcus yelled for her to keep going, and Emily continued chanting with every ounce of strength she had. Slowly, the massive figure shrank, flickered, and finally collapsed into a writhing black puddle that hissed before vanishing completely. Silence fell, heavy and absolute, broken only by their ragged breathing. Exhausted and trembling, Emily and Marcus fled the manor, racing through the fog-laden streets of Ravenwood. The town felt eerily calm, almost lifeless, as though it were holding its breath after the confrontation. Dawn was breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in muted oranges and grays. Relief surged through Emily. She thought they had escaped. But as she climbed into her car, she noticed something in the rear-view mirror. A faint shadow sat silently in the back seat, formless yet unmistakably watching her. Her stomach tightened. The sun's light touched the edges of the town, but it didn't touch the darkness that lingered within Ravenwood. Some secrets, some horrors could not be banished. Emily started the engine, gripping the wheel tightly, her eyes flicking nervously to the back seat. The shadow did not move, did not speak, but its presence was a cold, unyielding reminder. Ravenwood had released her, but it had not forgotten her. Somewhere in the folds of the town's darkness, it waited for the next visitor, someone brave or foolish enough to step inside. As the car disappeared down the foggy road, the last thing the audience sees is Ravenwood silhouetted against the rising sun, windows black, shadows shifting just beyond the light, whispering the promise of horrors yet to come. The story ends with a chilling unease, leaving the audience questioning whether Emily truly escaped or if the darkness of Ravenwood has only begun to follow her.